relax and watch a favorite show or a favorite movie. You have your TV snacks at hand. You have a cozy blanket maybe. And maybe for some of you, a cat on your lap. Some of you, you're like, absolutely not. That's okay. You're sitting in your comfy spot and everything is all set. You are ready to relax. And then you look over and you are filled with dread. You look over and you see the worst possible thing you could ever imagine. The remote is missing. It's not where you left it or where you thought you left it. And now you are so comfy. You are in the perfect spot. The cat has finally settled down on your lap. In our house, that's a rarity. And it's like if our little cat Pumpkin does that, nothing's happening until she moves. But now you have to get up to get that remote. And you will spend hours looking for that remote instead of just walking up to the TV. I mean, nowadays you got different systems and stuff, and you can't even control it without the remote. Maybe it's your phone, and that's missing. But this morning, I want to talk about control. We are going to start a series on control. And today we're going to talk about the home button. But if you have a problem with losing your remote, and here's what's going to happen. I'm going to forget this at church today. And when we go home, but if you have a problem with losing your remote, I found some pretty awesome solutions I came across a few weeks ago, and I was like, I gotta bring that up. You could maybe, if you've got a bunch of remotes, somehow affix them all to a board. That's hard to lose. All right, or you could just put one remote per stick, get a long board. You can lose a remote, but good luck losing a 2x4 in your couch or whatever. All right. Or if my wife's a baker, so the spoon would work, or if you're a painter, you could use a paint roller, a little harder to lose. Or you could use like little things, just make it bigger. This is my favorite one. You could attach it to an anvil. Good luck having kids lose the remote. They can't even pick it up. Or, I saw this, and if anybody in Tennessee, call them up. That's a steal of a deal. $10. You can have all your remotes super glued together. See, because the worst thing is when you lose control. The worst thing to happen is when you lose your controller because you just feel helpless. And we can all identify with times in our life where maybe it's not just losing a controller. There are times in our lives when we feel like we've just lost control. And it's a terrible, terrible feeling. And this morning we are going to start a series on control by looking at the life of Abraham. Now, if you don't know who Abraham is, I'm kind of shocked that he's not a figure that we would study in school. Because he is a figurehead that represents at least 56% of the world's population. Now, I know going through school, we only went so far back. Most of the stuff was Canadian history, and I learned a bit about a little Greek and stuff when I got into the philosophy or English literature. You learn a bit about the French Revolution. But for the most part, we kind of stick to our own history. But this guy, Abraham, can be tied to roughly 56% of the world's faith. Whether it's Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, this guy is pretty important. Now, knowing what Jesus has done, that he died on the cross, that he rose from the dead, that he came, was born, a descendant of Abraham. As we look at Abraham's life, it is Jesus that truly makes Abraham incredible. But we're going to look at Abraham's life and look at what made him so important. And we're going to look at the control. And this morning we are going to talk about home. Home. And it all started with Abram, who would later become Abraham. Started with Abram leaving his home behind. We're going to read in Genesis 11, verse 31. Genesis chapter 11, verse 31. Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Abram, and together they set out from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. Terah lived 205 years, and he died in Haran. That's a pretty long life. I need the one-a-days that he was taken. The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. Now, I fully moved out of my parents' house. Well, fully is subjective. But when I was 23, I left some stuff behind, and even the last time we were at my parents', they said, "Hey, we found some stuff for you to take home, because we don't want it." And Joanna was like, "Neither do we." There was some stuff I was like, I kind of want to keep that, and kept some of it. Maybe you'll see some of it in the whistle stop, who knows. But I moved out when I was 23. I still relied on them for a bit of help, but Abram, if you kind of do the math, the dates and ages that they give you, I'm sure my parents were glad that I didn't wait until I was 145 years old to move out. But that's when Abram left his family. Genesis 12, verses 5 to 9 will continue. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran. And they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he went on towards the hills east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east, where he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. Then Abram set out and continued towards the Negev. Now, home is a pretty big deal to almost everybody. You've probably heard different sayings on home. Maybe "home is where the heart is," a song that you might know from Elvis, or it was actually a quote that was originally attributed to Pliny the Elder, who was a Roman commander shortly after the time of Jesus. Maybe you've heard the saying, home is where you hang your hat. Home is where love resides. Memories are created. Friends always belong and laughter never ends. There's no place like home. And one of my favorites, the home is where the Wi-Fi connects. Home is important and it's meaningful and it's where you can go and things are where you put them. Even the lost remote. Home is familiar. It's what you know. The dirt on the toilet is your dirt. It's home. And that's why on remotes, they have home buttons. It takes you back to what's familiar. If you get helplessly lost in the settings or in some app, you can hit the home button and you know where you are taken to. It will take you home to the main page where you can start over. Now, what would happen if somebody reprogrammed that home button to go somewhere else? You would be pretty frustrated. I'd be pretty frustrated. Like, how do I get home? This home button doesn't work. Now, growing up, I moved a few times. My parents stopped moving when I was 10. We finally they're still living there, the house that we got when I was 10. But it was very clear to me where home was. It was where my mom and dad lived, and sometimes, unfortunately, where my siblings lived. Home was where my family was. And then all of a sudden, I hit an age where people talk about moving out of your home. Where people talk about moving out of your parents' house. And the definition of what home was begins to change. And of course, there were discussions on whether that was economically possible and how I would actually find a place and move out of home. How is this all going to work? And if you are in the midst of that or it's in the future coming up, I know it's a stressful time when the home that was home can no longer be home. And after I graduated from Bible college and went back to my parents' house, though it had been home, I did not want to be there anymore. And I could spin you an altruistic story of how I followed the call of God and left my home behind to become a volunteer youth pastor. Meanwhile, yes, I was a volunteer youth pastor, but there was a good chunk of that where it's like, I need to just move out. And when I had a friend of mine who said, hey, come back and live with our family again, because I had lived there for some of the summer in fourth year. They said, we miss you. We'll connect you to a church that needs a youth pastor. And you don't have to pay any rent until you get a paying job. I was like, well, I love my parents when I'm not living with them. And so God used that to kind of get me started on the path that He had for me. And He was most certainly working through my life. But I did not hear God audibly speak to me, David, go to the place I will show you. I didn't hear that. In fact, if God had said that to me like He said it to Abraham, this is probably why I was not Abraham, I would have been like, maybe you show me first and then we'll talk. See, when God spoke to Abraham, He said, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. He didn't tell Abram where. He didn't tell Abram, all right, here's a map. This is where you're going to go. This is what it's going to look like. Here's your new house. Here's your new place. He said, go and I'm going to show you. And it's not even just that. He's saying, leave what you are familiar with. Leave your family. 175 years of habits and familiarity. Leave. And Abram, he doesn't say to God, well, you know what, show me first. He doesn't say to God, well, you know, it's comfortable here, I'm just going to stick here. I think you can do what you want here. And he goes. And you could think, well, I mean, if God promises to bless you, of course you're going to go. Because God said, I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse you. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Isn't that's pretty good? Pretty good promise. But Abram had to say, okay, I don't have a child. How is this going to be? How are you going to make my family into a great nation? My wife has been unable to have a child. How is this going to be possible? God didn't show him the details, didn't unfold exactly what would happen. Abram could have been very hesitant. He could have said, no, I have control here. If I leave, I don't know. I may go into a land of people I can't even understand or communicate with. If I leave, I'm going to lose control. I'm going to stay home. We don't exactly know what went on in Abram's mind. We don't know if he went and talked to Sarai. Hope he did. If God ever tells you something, go talk to your spouse, especially if it's moving. But this is what we know. Genesis 12, verse 4. So Abram went, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. At 75, Abram, his wife, his nephew, I said 125 years of habits. He was 75. His dad was that. At 75, Abram, his wife, his nephew, and his small group headed out. Today, 75 is past retirement age. 75 is not an age to be reimagining what your home is. It's an age to settle down. It's not an age to go off on a journey of having to remake home. When I get to 75, I would love to be settled down with no plans to move and just like, this is going to be home base. But when God says go, Abram goes. To where? Who knows? God just says go. And again, you may be thinking, well, those blessings are pretty inviting. And you know what? In today's world, a lot of people, especially younger people, are focused on, this is what I would love to happen in my life. Their goal is not necessarily to have a stable life, but to be famous. And then wealthy. And so you could look at that and be like, well, that's exactly what I'm going for. Because there's a measure of control that comes. When you are famous, when people listen to you, when you can have input on other people's decisions, when you have money and you can buy things, there's control. There's a measure of control in that. And yet, Abraham wasn't given a timeline. He wasn't given exact details. He was just told, go. And trust me, this is what I'm going to do for you. Abram had to let go of the control that he had. He had to change what home was. And the issue with when we look at God's blessings, or just blessing in general, or wealth or fame, see, there's no problem in using what you have been given to reflect God's love to other people. If God has given you money, if God has given you influence, if God has used you in a way to bring you to where you are, there's nothing wrong with using that to point back to God. The problem comes when we take the attitude of the peoples we see just before Abraham, just before Abram. In Genesis 11, verse 1-4, we read, "Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, 'Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly.' They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, 'Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth.'" And what happened? God stopped the project. He confused their language. See, the heart of these people was, let us make a name for ourselves. Let us become famous. Let people remember who we are. Let us do it on our own. Let's take control. You might have heard Ernest Henley's poem Invictus, or at least know the way it ends. In 1875, he finished the short poem, and the way it ends, it says, "It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul." There's a degree in truth to that. We do have free will. We do have the ability to choose, to control the use of the limited power that we have to make decisions. But at the end of the day, God, out of love for His creation, will not allow us to take our control and completely run wild with it. He'll put an end to what goes against His renewal of His creation. We see that at the Tower of Babel. Did God want to suppress people? Was God's desire to just put an end to it? Be like, no. Did He not want people to know? But He turns to Abram and He says, "I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great. And you will be a blessing." See, the problem wasn't in the fact that they might become known. It was who was in control. And God picks this guy and says, "Listen, this is what I'm going to do for you." And he's given the opportunity to hold on to control or to say, okay, God, you have the remote. You determine where my home button leads to. See, it was okay for God to control the home button for Abram. He could even reprogram it so that it brought Abram to a whole different, unfamiliar location. Abram was allowing God the control to completely change his definition of what home was. Abram came to the conclusion that no matter where his relatives were, no matter what he was comfortable with, no matter which community he felt most at ease in, no matter how long he had lived in a place, no matter where he had the most control, Abram decided that home is wherever God says he wants me. Home is wherever God says he wants me. What does home look like for you? If you were to hit the home button on your life remote, where would it take you? Would it be in that lazy boy chair in front of the TV? Would it be out on your porch? Would it be with your family? Where would that home button take you? This week, as part of your wake-up routine, I want to challenge you to take a moment to say, God, this morning, I'm letting you decide where my home is today. I'm letting you decide today where my home is. Please tell me today where you want me. See, God could say, hey, right now your home is going to be going off to work for this time and being who I made you to be. And then your home is going to be coming back and being the person I made you to be there. See, I'm not saying God's going to speak to all of us and say, hey, guess what? We're closing down the church because we're all moving to different places. You know what? If God tells you that you need to move, I hope you listen. But God can also say, I want you here. Where does that home button take you? Where will you let God change what your home is? See, maybe God will say, your home today is in a prayer meeting on Wednesday night. We're going to meet here, by the way, 7 p.m. Maybe God says your home is not going to be in that meeting because I have something else for you. But every morning, wake up and say, God, this is what I think I want. This is what I think my home button should be. But God, I'm going to let you determine what my home is. And I guarantee you that you will see God bless you and bless others through you. No, I'm not necessarily talking about money. Too often we equate blessing with money or the things that you want. But God's incredible plan will unfold in your life in a way that brings fulfillment. And you will truly feel home. Psalms 32 says in verses 8 to 10, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my loving eye on you. Do not be like the horse or the mule, which have no understanding, but must be controlled by bit and bridle, or they will not come to you. Many are the woes of the wicked, but the Lord's unfailing love surrounds the one who trusts in him. Are you trying to hold on to control? Or will you say, God, I'm letting you define home for me today? The music team can come back as we close. We don't have to look hard to see the effects of people trying to control what their home looks like. We can look at the wars around our world today and if I may be so bold, sum it up to say it's people trying to determine what their home should look like. We can see the effects of what our world happens when, in our world, when people say, this is what I want my home to look like. But what would it look like if people turned around and said, you know what, God, my home is where you say it is? What would happen if each person said, God, today my home is where you say it is? King David, inspired by the Spirit of God, said what would happen. We read it, Psalm 32, verse 10, the end of it. The Lord's unfailing love surrounds the one who trusts in him. Imagine how God's unfailing love would renew our world. And too often we can point at other people and say, they need this, they need this. How powerful it is when we start with ourselves and say, you know what, I'm going to start saying, I need this. God, tell me where my home is today. So this week, I encourage you to say that as part of your wake-up routine. God, my home is where you want me. Let's sing together.